Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Micah just checking in. Actually, I wanted to do a video on contest prep and how to continually trying to fill that void when you're feeling hungry, because naturally you're in a deficit and you're doing it for quite a long time. And although you're doing it incrementally and as you're hitting sticking points, you're not just dropping calories just for the sake of dropping calories. You want to see progression, movement within body fat and physique changes. And I don't care who you are, as you drop calories or macronutrients along the way, you're going to get hungrier and hungrier, and you're wanting to fuel. You want to maximize all your efforts in the gym and still have function throughout the course of the day. And it gets to a point where you're figuring out, how can I stay full? How can I, visually see something on a plate and not get depressed because it's not very much food, to kind of, it's kind of a mind thing. And so I wanted to go through some things, some examples of what you can do, but it's really about volume, more bang for your buck when it comes down to it, because this is visually appealing to the eye. Everybody likes to see a full plate, and also it just kind of helps out with feeling full naturally. The more volume you have, the more your food can take place in your stomach and get that full effect. That's going to help in the process. And so it's got a few examples, but basically I'm more on the flexible dieting side if it fits your macros, but more on the just having a balance throughout prep. And so it gets really tricky to kind of put in, oh yeah, I can definitely put in my slow churn ice cream. I can definitely put in this in my diet. I can fit that in, but it really comes down to quality as well. And because the quality foods are going to help you stay full a lot longer, and it gives you more volume to play around with. So let me give you a couple examples. So when it comes down to it, let me just give you a fruit example. Dried fruit. This is some cranberries. This is one serving, 40 grams weighed out. Doesn't look like very much. And to be honest with you, when you look at the breakdown of cranberries, for one serving, it's 33 grams of carb and has a pretty good amount of fiber, 3 grams, and there's no fats and no proteins. So right off the bat, it just covers your carbohydrates. And fruit is good, don't get me wrong, but when you look at something like that, 33 grams when it's dried fruit, really there's a lot of natural sugar. It's just really condensed as far as sugar or carbohydrates. And let's take that 33 grams and look at some bread. So this is Sara Lee's 45 Delight bread, and for 2 slices of this is 18 grams of carbohydrates. So if I were to get like close to 4 slices of bread, that's going to be the equivalent of my cranberries. So right off the bat, you could probably make yourself a sandwich or just some toast, and you're going to get more volume within that realm. And to mine, with 18 grams of carbohydrates per 2 slices, that gives you 5 grams of fiber, and also just 1 gram of fat and 6 grams of protein. So right off the bat, it does have a little bit more macronutrients as far as proteins and fat in there, but it gives you a little bit more volume when it comes down to it. So you have some ability to mix around and see visually on a plate a lot more. Also, I love Rice Krispie treats, and let's just say I have 2 of these bad boys. And really, when you look at the breakdown of these, it's like 17 grams of carbs, 1 gram of fat, and no protein. And so when you have this is 34 grams of carbohydrates. When you look at it, when you're on lower calories, it really isn't that much food. And so you want to get more bang for your buck. And that goes to show you, if you have, say you wanted a hamburger, you can have one of these hamburger buns and fill that with some meat, some egg whites or something to that effect, where you have something of substance. And that's the thing too, is that when you have fiber in in your sources, that's going to help with satiety. It's going to help you feel fuller a lot longer. And honestly, it's going to help out with fat loss as well in that process. Another example of carbohydrates, I think that's the biggest fight, is how much carbohydrates, more bang for my buck. Because I know naturally when you start dieting, that's what you try to pull from is carbohydrates, fats as well. But you want to keep fats relatively high as long as you can, just so that it has to deal with hormonal balance as well. So typically that's what you naturally pull from is carbohydrates. So I have some examples of that. So I got some rice cakes. This is the white cheddar, and it's 8 grams of carbohydrates per rice cake. And so you could have close to 4 of these, and that's 32 grams of carbohydrates rather than 2 of these Rice Krispie treats. And that's a little bit more volume right there in itself. And so when it comes down to fats, this is where it gets a little more trickier, just because if you're using like olive oil, if you're using coconut oil, that's one serving is 17 grams of fat per serving. It's not even visually something that you can see on your plate either. So it makes it really difficult when you're doing your foods, that if you add an oil or cook with it, you're almost not visually able to see that on the plate. And although it tastes better on your food, something like, you can do peanut butter, you can do nuts. This little bag of nuts, this one serving is about 16 grams of fat. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter is about 14 to 16 grams of fat, depending on what you're getting. So with fat sources, that's what kind of the name of the game is. If you want to see something visually on the plate, you kind of have to pick something that has a pretty good substantial amount of fat on it so that you can actually see it. I'm not saying it's wrong to cook with coconut oil or olive oil, but just to spice it up, to be able to see that on the plate can really help on that respect. Carbohydrates, so I got fat-free Pringles. Just for one of these, just eating the whole thing, it's about 75 grams of carbs. And when you think about that, that's a lot of volume. I'm not saying you eat a whole thing of Pringles in one sitting, but when you look at volume, 75 grams of carbohydrates comparable to if you had 2 servings of cranberries. Visually, what do you like to look at, and how much food you can get when it comes down to it. These are really hard to fit into a dieting phase when you're kind of closely, when you're getting closer and closer to a show. But just one of these is 52 grams of carbohydrates and about 8 grams of protein and 1.5 grams of fat. So that just kills off a lot of your carbohydrates, and it's not that big. And I could easily get about 6-7 slices of bread to that equivalent. I guess the main point is just watching how much volume you're getting per meal. And vegetables have very low, fruits and vegetables have a lot less carbohydrates depending on what you're getting, and you can get a lot of volume when it comes down to those. A lot more volume with vegetables than fruit, depending on what fruit you're choosing. But that tends to help out with seeing a lot more on your plate and feeling like, hey, I'm getting actually some substance with my meals. One other thing to kind of note too is that using smaller plates, smaller dishes, smaller Tupperwares for those that pack your food. Visually, when you see a smaller plate or smaller Tupperware and your food is really stuffed to the brim, that gives you a visual like, hey, I got a lot more food than I actually do. Smaller utensils help out as well. So usually, like if you have like a plastic fork or something that's like a really small utensil, it tends to help out with giving you smaller bites, but at the end of the day you're eating a lot longer in the process. So those are just some of the things when it comes down to trying to survive and on lower macronutrients, lower calories. One last example is the Big 100. So I use this in my building phase just because sometimes I just have a lot of calories left over, or I just need to kill off, and something that's condensed, a lot of calories. But this one bar, seriously, is like 5 grams of fat, 50 grams of carbohydrates, and 28 grams of protein. Seriously, if I broke that down, I could rather eat just one of these bagels. I could have some meat to fill out that protein, so just like 4 ounces of meat, chicken, beef, and then depending on what my protein source is, I could add in some fats as well. A lot more on the plate as far as volume is concerned, just for this one blasted bar. So that's just some examples of what you can do during a prep, but honestly, when it comes down to it, becomes volume. How much can you fit, and also a variety of foods, and looking at fiber, looking at smaller dishes, smaller utensils, smaller Tupperware, because the more you can visually see something, that's what's really going to help out with that mental state, and also just the fact that you're going to feel fuller a lot longer when you have fiber within your diet. And so it's not just the Rice Krispie treats or even goldfish, or just like all the fun things. Those things don't have very much fiber, or they're not really nutrient dense, so they're not going to keep you full for very long. For those people that can, diet on high calories or high macros, yeah, you could probably fit that in a lot longer than those that don't. But for me, I typically was running really low with my carbohydrates. I think the lowest I got was like 75 gram carb, and I was at 50 gram fat. And seriously, you can't really play around too much with that as far as volume when it comes down to the fun things. So I was naturally grabbing, a lot of fruits or a lot of vegetables, and just really trying to not use supplements or protein powders to give me food, but more so how much volume can I get with actual lean protein sources, meats. What can I do for the fat sources, and what can I do for the limited carbohydrates that I have? So hopefully that helps as far as giving you a picture of how you can approach your nutrition, especially when it comes down to contest prep. Thanks. Bye-bye.